Hello YouTube chess lovers and my friends, this is Gunjan here. Welcome to the 29th episode of Dirty Chess Tricks. In this episode, I'm going to show you some of the wonderful tricks and in fact a mini replica against Alekhine Defense from the white perspective. The Alekhine Defense arises after the move order e4 and black responds with the move knight to f6. Now as usual, the line I have recommended has a great surprise value. And on top of everything, black has to play very accurate moves to avoid lots of tricks and traps. Here my recommendation is you follow the main line for a while. For example, e5, knight to d5, d4. The main line Alekhine move continue with the move d6. And now comes the super surprise, bishop to c4. So white is attacking the knight. The most popular response from the black is to play knight to b6. However, if your opponent plays moves such as e6 or c6, then I have covered a model game in the PGN which will give you a very good insight how to handle such positions. Okay, knight to b6, bishop to b3, and now you can see by the arrows black has plenty of choices. Amongst them, d captures e5 is probably the most popular response, but first we need to know what we are going to do if black plays other moves. The first move I want to consider is knight to c6. Now as usual, I am going to suggest something aggressive, and here my recommendation is you continue with this lovely pawn sacrifice e6. So white idea is very clear. White want to sacrifice this pawn to get a tremendous initiative as black king side will completely jam up. The first important point to notice over here is black cannot capture this pawn with the bishop. The simple reason is after d5 black is going to lose a piece in the opening. So here the first reply is f captures e6. Afterwards white should continue with the move knight to f3. So now white has a very simple plan to play knight to g5 and nabbing the e6 pawn with a very good initiative. So accordingly, black has three major choices in this position. Kindly note, black cannot prevent this knight to g5 idea. The simple reason is, let's say a move such as h6 leads to the instant disaster after the move queen to d3. And if king to f7, then queen to f5 leads to the checkmate of the black king. So that's why black has tried other ways to interrupt our plan. Now the first move I want to consider is knight to a5, which has a clear idea to nabbing our bishop. No matter, we are going to continue with the move knight to g5, attacking e6, and after knight captures and pawn captures, black has to already play a precise move knight to d5. In one blitz game, my opponent tried the move g6, but to his horror he find out that after white's next reply, queen to f3, there is no stopping on the f7, and on top of everything, black king dance will start instantly in the opening. So g6 is not a good move in this position. The only accurate reply over here is knight to d5, which has the idea that if white plays queen to f3, then knight to f6 cover the f7 square. But here white has a very good reply, that is knight to c3. So if allowed, then white is definitely going to take that knight. So black has to play knight to f6, and afterwards white should continue with the move queen to d3. Now it doesn't matter whether your opponent plays g6 or c6. White's planning of the campaign will remain same. For example, in one of my game, my opponent tried the move c6. I castle on the king side, and now he played queen to c7. But there's a typical idea in this opening, and you should always remember this, that whenever you have sacrificed a pawn on e6, you can more or less regain it with the move rook to e1. And if it's required, then queen can also join into the attack. In this game, my opponent tried to desperately save his pawn, so he played the move e5, but this is just asking for it, because after d captures e5, and the move queen to c4, white obtained a winning position just within 15 moves. The second move I want to consider is g6, which has a very simple idea to play the move bishop to g7 and then castle on the king side. But once again, white can play the move knight to g5, and now there are two ways black can save the e6 pawn. Amongst them, d5 is a very bad move. The simple reason is after queen to f3, black has a similar problem which we have seen earlier. So once again, knight to d5 is a forced response, but white plan of campaign will remain same. Yup, we are going to play knight to c3 and try to dislodge this knight. Here black can try two responses. If black capture this knight, then the simplest is you play the move queen to f3, and not surprisingly enough, this position gives white a decisive advantage. For example, if your opponent continue here with the move knight captures d4, then after queen check, king to d7, pawn captures, knight captures bishop, pawn captures, queen to e8, queen captures e6 check, and now black response is force. Black has to play king to c6, afterwards queen to c4 check, king to d7, and now castle on the king side, where funny enough black has the only piece developed, and that is awkward king. The second move bishop to g7 is not good either. The simple reason is after knight captures, pawn captures, and bishop captures, not only white has stopped black to castle on the king side, but there is a threat on f7 which cannot be easily dealt. For example, in one online game, my opponent tried the move knight captures d4, but after following sequence, that is bishop check, king to f8, c3 hitting the knight, knight to f5, and now the very good move queen to b3 create some nasty problems for the black camp. Now it's amazing that black cannot play either bishop moves or the pawn moves because of the following problem. So let's say in the game my opponent tried the move bishop to f6. I responded with the move bishop captures g6, so there's a mate threaten on the f7. My opponent responded with the move e6, stopping the mate idea. But now comes a winning sequence, that is knight check, king to g7, bishop takes knight, pawn takes bishop, knight takes bishop, queen takes knight, and now bishop to e3. So my opponent has to forcefully play the move king to g6, and after castle on the queen side, white can easily launch a devastation on this nude king. The third and the final move black can try over here is e5, which is in fact the most popular choices by the black. But here white can play this tricky line, that is pawn captures, d5, and now castle on the king side. At first sight it looks like white is playing into the black hand, because after bishop to g4, black is indeed threatening this e5 square. But surprisingly enough, white is going to allow this with the move h3. Now if your opponent plays bishop to h5, then e6 is a very strong reply. So the forced reply is bishop captures f3, and after queen captures f3, what can be the more natural than capturing this pawn and attacking the queen? Well, that's right, but the following line illustrate what kind of danger black can face in this line, and here white should continue with the move queen to e2, attacking the knight, knight to g6, and here comes white's attack with the move rook to d1. One of my online game with a national master continue with the move e5. I respond with the move bishop to e3. So there's a simple threat of capturing the knight and then capturing a pawn. My opponent responded with the move c6. But this doesn't stop white's attack, because now white can open all the flanks with the move c4. And I think black is completely collapsing. My opponent tried the move queen to c7, but after pawn captures, knight captures, he was really shocked by white's next reply, Rook captures d5. Boom. Well, black doesn't have much choices. He captured my rook, but then after bishop check, king to d8, it is very obvious that something has gone horribly wrong in the opening. You can check out the rest of the game in the PGN. The second move I want to consider is bishop to f5. Well, against this, pretty much the same story. I'm going to recommend you should give this pawn sacrifice with the move e6, and now black has to capture with the bishop, because if he capture with the f pawn, which is hardly played in any games, white has a simple plan, that is knight to f3, and you can see, as I have highlighted by the arrows, white has a simple but very effective plan of campaign. So that's why in this position bishop captures e6 is more or less forced, and afterwards we should exchange this bishop. So once again the similar motifs of the knight to g5. The main line continue with the move knight to c6. White should castle on the king side, and almost all the games black follow up with the move g6 and queen to d7. For example, if you play queen to d7, then knight to g5, and black cannot castle, so he has to play g6, and the main line, which is g6 first, and now white will play the move knight to g5, and in order to save this pawn, black has to play the move queen to d7. Well, here my recommendation is you continue with the move queen to f3, and once again black has a huge problem on the f7. For example, he cannot castle. The simple reason is after knight to f7, white will nab an exchange, and even though engine suggests that the position is slightly better for the black, but in terms of practical play it is not easy for any human. Let me show you a sample line. Black's obvious response is knight takes d4, attacking the queen, queen to d3, and after bishop to g7, c3, knight to c6, knight captures rook, rook captures knight. White has a rook for knight and a 2 pawns, which is always going to favor white due to his extra exchange potential. After queen to f3, the most obvious response from the black is to play the move knight to d8, so covering both the square. But after knight to c3, it is very obvious that black king will be stay in the center high and dry. Now, to illustrate the plan of the campaign from the white perspective, I like to show you one of my game against a 2100 rated player, where my opponent continued with the move h6, hitting the knight. I responded with the move knight to h3, and after bishop to g7, white has a very strong reply, queen to d3. If black castles, then queen captures g6, where white get his pawn back with a very good initiative. So in the game, my opponent tried the move king to f7, but then comes knight to f4, hitting the pawn. He responded with the move g5, but after queen check, king to f8, and the move knight to h5, black is in a huge trouble. He decided to grab another pawn, but this is just too much, because after the following sequence, that is bishop to e3, bishop to f6, knight captures, pawn captures, queen check, king to g8, and now the line opening move f4 creates some great problems for the black camp. He responded with the move queen to f7, but after pawn takes, queen takes, rook takes, after the whole transaction, it is turned out that white pieces are more active, and even though material wise it's equal, it is only white who is playing for the win in this position. The third move I want to consider is g6, which I think is the most popular choice at the club level. But after the following sequence, that is knight to f3, bishop to g7, and knight to g5, already black is having some great difficulties. In many online games, my opponent straight away fall into this trick, that is castle on the king side. which is outright blunder, because after the move e6, black has a lost position within 8 moves. If he exchange everything on the e6, then white will nab an exchange. And instead of that, if you play moves such as f6, then you can put your knight straight away into the black guts with the move knight to f7. And after queen to e8 and the move d5, it is a disgusting sight for the black. Not only black has to sack an exchange in the later game, but white has a simple plan to play the move h4, h5 and getting on with his wonderful attack. So it's very obvious that castle is prohibited in this position. So black has to play a passive move such as e6. But in that case, his light square bishop is already in the prison. And on top of everything, white can start his kingside attack immediately with the move queen to f3. Now once again, black response is forced. Black cannot castle on the king side. For example, if he castle on the king side, then white can continue with the move queen to h3, attacking the h7. So black response is forced. Black has to play the move h6. But then comes knight to e4, attacking h6. And this is the reason why castle is a very bad choice. King to h7 leads to the instant disaster after the move bishop to g5. And after the move f6, you can take this pawn, as this bishop cannot move due to the devastation on h6. So here the good reply is d captures e5, and after d captures e5, black should continue with the move h5. Okay, no matter, white will continue his piece development with the move knight to c3, and now white has a very good threat of bishop to g5, which black cannot ignore it. In one blitz game with a FIDE master, my opponent grabbed this hot pawn with the move bishop captures e5, but then comes bishop to g5, hitting the queen. He responded with the move queen to d4. I played bishop to e7, hitting the rook, and after rook to e8, I played my next move and my opponent resigned. Can you spot it? I hope you find this wonderful blow. Rook to d1, and bye bye Miss Queen. So this game shows the potential of this attacking setup by white. After queen to f3, the main line run with the move queen to e7, knight to e4, d captures e5, and now majority of the white people has tried the move bishop to g5, which doesn't create a good result for the white. But instead of that, I am going to recommend a tricky move, that is d captures e5. Now, as we seen in my last game, grabbing this hot pawn is a very risky one, and I have attached a sample line in the PGN. So instead of that, black has to concentrate on his piece development with the move knight 8 to d7. No matter, white should continue with the move bishop to g5, and after queen check, knight to c3. Once again, white offers this poison pawn to the black. Now if your opponent take this pawn in either way, I have covered a sample line in the PGN. So instead of that, white should continue with his piece development with castle on the king side. Well, so far black is doing quite good, but after white's next reply, that is knight to f6 check, I think black has a huge problem. Now to illustrate the danger in this position, I like to show you one of my game with an international master, where my opponent continued with the move king to h8. I responded with the move queen to h3. He played the move h5, and now I think g4 is a bit risky at this point. Instead of that, I played a stronger move, that is castle on the queen side. My opponent continued with the move knight captures e5, but he completely overlooked white's next threat, that is g4, which at first sight looks impossible, right? Because black can take this pawn, and this is in fact he did. But white's idea is to play the move queen to h4, and now that knight is indeed pinned, and white has a simple idea to play either f3 or h3, nabbing a piece with a great attack on the king side. In the game, after a long think, my opponent continued with the move a5, so protecting his queen. But what he overlooked is after the move a3, this queen cannot stay on the fourth rank. After queen to e7 and knight captures g4, white emerged with an extra piece and attack to boot. Last but not least, what happens if your opponent plays the most popular response, that is d captures e5? Well, after that, white response is very obvious. White has to play this queen to h5 move, attacking f7. Now here g6 is a very bad response. The simple reason is after queen captures e5 and rook to g8, black had never able to castle on the king side. So that's why at this position the main move is e6. But you can see that with this move, black's light square bishop is not going to take any aggressive place in the game. Here white should continue with the move d captures e5, and now as I have highlighted by the arrows, white has a very simple but very effective plan of campaign. So in the majority of cases, no matter whatever black plays, you can stick with this plan and obtain a very good position. Now to highlight the potential of it, I like to show you this plan in the action against most critical response by the black. So as per the online database, the highest played move against this setup is a5. Well, here white should continue with the move a4, not allowing that pawn to go further, and black idea is to play the move knight to a6 and put this knight on the c5 square where it can nab the bishop pair. Well, no matter, it will not stop our plan because white will continue with the move knight to f3, and after knight to c5 we are going to continue with the move bishop to g5, hitting the queen, bishop to e7, and now knight to c3. Okay, black execute his plan, that is knight captures bishop, pawn captures, and now main line continue with the move castle on the king side. Kindly note, black cannot capture this bishop. The simple reason is after knight captures, queen to e7, and now knight to h7 gives white a very good position. So that's why castle is the main line move. But after that, white is going to play his last usual move, that is rook to d1. And surprisingly enough, this move creates a great difficulty in the black camp. I get two games in this line. In the first game, my opponent tried the move queen to e8, but after queen to h4, I force him to capture my bishop, and after knight takes, black has to play the another forcing move, that is h6. So at first sight it looks like black has stopped every white attack, but after white's next reply, that is knight g to e4, I think black has already a lost position. And to show you how quickly game can finish, my opponent tried the move bishop to d7, but to his horror he has to face this move. Bam! Well, it's a fork, so black has to take it, but after pawn takes and the move queen captures h6, it's unavoidable checkmate. He tried the move f5, but after queen check, king to h8 and rook to d3, he simply resigned as there is no adequate way to stop the mate. The second move black can try over here is bishop to d7. Well, after that, white should castle on the king side. And now my opponent, who is 2200 plus rated, continue with the move c5. So he wants to start attacking on the queen side, but I think it's too little too late, because after white's next reply, that is rook to d3, white has a simple threat of rook to d1 and nabbing a piece. For example, if black continue with the move c4, then the simplest is you take this pawn, and after knight captures, rook to d1, knight to b6, white has this winning move bishop to e3, and black is going to lose a piece. So considering all this, in the game my opponent tried the move f6, but this is not good either, because after pawn takes, bishop takes, queen takes, black still get the losing position after the following sequence, that is queen captures c5, knight to d5, knight takes, pawn takes, queen takes check, bishop to e6, and now queen to b5, where clearly white obtained a 2-pawn advantage. Well, that's it guys. I hope you enjoy and learn this wonderful setup against Alekhine Defense. Thank you for watching this video. Feel free to like, subscribe and comment on my video, and I'll meet you in my next episode very soon. Bye and take care. But can you believe Black has made a blunder? Yes, indeed. Knight to c4. Well, sacrificing the whole piece. Okay, I hope you find this wonderful blow. Knight to d6 check. And black position is completely crumbling.